Okay, today we're learning Shabbat Daf Lamed Zayin. We started this sugya on the last shiur about Kirash Sikua. We're now in the third parak of Masechet Shabbat, and we have a very confusing Mishnah because it's not so confusing, but the Gemara decides to confuse us a little bit about it and try to figure out, because there's this other opinion of Hananya, who holds, okay, let's go back to the Mishnah very briefly. Kirash Sikua B'kashu B'gavava. We're going to get back to these terms a lot, which is called grufa uktuma. It means when we move the coals to the side or we put ashes on top in order to start putting out the fire. Now, once we do that, things that weren't allowed before are now allowed. The question is, what exactly are we talking about when we say lo yitain? Are we talking about before Shabbat? That if you want to leave food on the fire before Shabbat, you have to cover the flame and cover the fire, or kind of sweep the coals to the side so that you don't accidentally end up stoking the coals on Shabbat? Or is this part actually talking about returning something to the fire on Shabbat, which would then imply that before Shabbat it's allowed even if it's not covered up? And that's the whole big debate. And in addition to the debate about that, there's also some question about whether we're talking about food that's already fully cooked, or can we even mean food that's partially cooked? Okay, kemal chaben drosai, which is it's already edible, even though most people don't normally eat it in that way. So the Mishnah starts off talking about this lo yitain, which the Gemara debates. Does that mean from before Shabbat shihiyah, or does that mean lahachzir, returning it to the flame on Shabbat? Even though some people said returning maybe even means just before Shabbat, but we're going to stick with it means on Shabbat. Then we had a machloket Beit Shammai, Beit Hillel. Is it only hot water that we're discussing, but not a cooked item according to Beit Shammai, or Beit Hillel who says it could actually be both? The main difference between hot water and a regular cooked item is the hot water, if you leave it on the flame longer, and we're going to get into this terminology, so I'm already going to introduce you to it right now, is it's mitztamek veralu. The more you leave it on the fire, what will happen? It will boil out. So that's not good for it. Okay. Likewise, there could be solid foods that the longer you leave them on the flame, the worse it'll be. They'll get burnt. But then there's other food, which is called mitztamek veyafelo, which means the longer you leave it on, the better it is. Think about meat, how the longer you leave meat, it softens up and it gets better. Okay. Some people might say it's too well done. We don't like it that way. But there were people who liked it the longer it was cooked, and therefore they're going to often talk about meat dishes as mitztamek v'yafelo. The longer it goes, the better it is for the food, which means if it's better, well then you might come to stoke the coals. So if it's ralo, then there's less of a chance, and that's why Beit Shammai says chamin, hot water, one can, but not a tafshil, not a cooked item. Beit Hillel says no, both are fine, and then the question is, we'll get into, does he only mean cooked foods that are mitztamek v'ralo and they get worse, or does he also mean v'yafelo? And then the final machloket is Beit Shammai omrim notlin aval lo machzirin. You can take it off a flame on Shabbat, but you can't put it back on. Ubeit Hillel omrim af machzirin. Beit Hillel says no, you can actually return it to the fire. Now we ended in the last shiur with the fact that it seems, okay, so the Gemara asked the big question, which is the Mishnah talking about shihiyah, leaving it on in the beginning, and then the second part is talking about returning it to the fire, or is even the beginning talking about returning it to the flame? To which the Gemara then said, again, and then, okay, so the main thing to remember from last shiur is that there's two main opinions among the Tanaim. There's Hananya and there's Tanakama. Hananya holds, and this is in the fourth line of where the Gemara starts on Lamed Vav, and then we'll finally get to our daf, which is Kol Shehu Kemalchal Ben Drosai. As long, he says, number one, all it has to be is malchal ben drosai. He's made tell about that. And then he says, mutar l'shoto al gabei kira apa pisha eno galuf b'katum. You can put it on a fire from before Shabbat, even if the coals aren't moved to the side or put out a little bit by the ashes. So the Gemara wants to know, maybe our Mishnah follows Hananya, even though it's really not the pshat of the Mishnah. To which the Gemara then says, it's really not the pshat of the Mishnah, and it doesn't make any sense to say that, because why would the beginning be talking about chazara and then the end be talking about chazara? It makes no sense. So starting with the top of Lamed Zayin, now the Gemara is going to actually say no, there's a way to read our Mishnah that could work with Hananya. So la'olam emelacha, you really could say, lahachzir t'nan, the Mishnah really does mean lahachzir. Now, how can you read that if we just said the beginning is shehiyah, it sounds like, and the end is chazara? It would seem to be repetitive. Well, chisura machasra v'hachi katani. This is a typical answer in the Gemara when the Gemara says, well, the Mishnah is actually just missing a few words. Okay, and in fact, if you look at the sheet, that the study guide, I put the words that are extra and added in blue, just so you can see it more clearly, what they're going to do to our Mishnah, and they're going to add words. Now, you might say, why are they doing this? So it seems that there was an interest on the part of the rabbis of the Gemara to read the Mishnah as Hananya's approach. Maybe some people even say, some of them are Mepharshim and trying to figure out halacha l'maaseh, say that what's really going on here is that the Gemara the rabbis agreed with Hananiah's opinion, and therefore, in other words, it shows the strength of Hananiah's opinion that's why they're trying to show that the Mishnah actually is Hananiah. So here it goes. So it's missing words, and hachi katani, this is the way you should read it. Kirash sikua bekasha begavava, so far the same as what we had before. If it's with straw or little twigs, which burn very quickly, machzirin aleha tafshil. So instead of yitain, as it says in our Mishnah, they're going to substitute the word lahachzir. You can return it, meaning on Shabbat. Begefet uve'etzim lo yachzir ad sheyigrov. You can't return it unless you stoke the coal, you move the coals to the side. Oh, ad sheyitain te'efer, or you put ashes on top. Aval. Now here come the extra words. Now if you say that, then what would you say about shehiyah, leaving it on the flame? Lishhot mashin. You do actually leave it on the flame. Afal pisha ino garuf ino katum. Even if it's not moved to the side or covered up. Umahen mashin. Now the second machloket, even though it wasn't talking about shehiyah is only implied in terms of shehiyah is totally fine. Now why would shehiyah be totally fine? This goes back to what we learned in Daf Yud Ted, if you remember, about all these things, or Yud Ched even, what one can do before Shabbat and leave to happen on Shabbat. So there's no problem of leaving something on the flame before Shabbat. That's of course fine according to this interpretation. Again, what's the opposite approach? The opposite approach is no, you can't leave it before Shabbat in a way that you might come to accidentally stoke the coals on Shabbat. So therefore, just like with the candles, Shema Yateh, right? There's all sorts of preparations we do before Shabbat to ensure that we don't accidentally do something wrong on Shabbat. But this approach says no, as long as you're doing it before Shabbat, it's totally fine. But then there's a machloket, according to this, about what actually can be left on the flame. And then Beit Shammai omrim chamin avalot tafshil. Beit Shammai will say only hot water, because again, what will happen? It will evaporate. We're not worried. Avalot tafshil, but a tafshil he doesn't allow. However, according to this interpretation, Beit Hillel omrim chamin v'tafshil. Anything is allowed. And now here come the more extra words. And by the way, now we're going back to the beginning of our Mishnah. When we mentioned this issue of chazara, well, just so you should know, it's lav divrei hakoli. Not everybody agrees that you can return something to the fire on Shabbat. Ela machloket Beit Shammai uBeit Hillel. Shebeit Shammai omrim notlim v'lo machzirin, uBeit Hillel omrim af machzirin. Okay, and then it goes back and it tells you, by the way, not everybody agrees that you can return things to the fire on Shabbat. If it was on the fire before Shabbat and you want to return it on Shabbat, let's say you take it off and you put it back on, well, we said before you could do it as long as what? As long as it's garufa katum, as long as the fire is covered at this point, right? The coals are moved to the side or covered up. But that's only Beit Hillel's opinion. Beit Shammai doesn't think that one can do this. And in that way, we can read our Mishnah according to the other approach. So we now have two ways to read the Mishnah. We don't yet know which way to read it. The point is, we tried to prove that it's talking about shehiyah from the pshat of the Mishnah, and now the Gemara reads the Mishnah in a different way. The one could also say it's lahachzir. So now what the Gemara is going to do is try to bring outside sources, other sources that would give us an idea about what our Mishnah really means and what would be lahalacha, and therefore what our Mishnah means. So Tashma, let's learn from here. The Amar Rabbi Chelbo. Now Rabbi Chelbo, Amar Rav Chama bar Guria, Amar Rav, said the following statement about our Mishnah. So once we have a statement about our Mishnah, maybe we can infer from there what our Mishnah was talking about. Lo shanu ela al gaba, aval litocha asur. This that we've talked about in our Mishnah is only allowed if you put it on the fire. but not if you put it inside the fire. Okay, so again, there was this, I don't know exactly the reality, but I assume that it was somewhat in the ground. In the ground, there was this fire, and if you put it in the part that's in the ground, that's problematic. So which way is this going to go? If you say we're talking about the Mishnah's topic was lahachzir, in which case, now you have to add a few words here. Rashi kind of adds them for us. If you look at Rashi, he says, "Aval lishhot mashin afilu b'she'ena grufa." Okay, meaning that then the Gemara allows for, the Mishnah is allowing you to put it and leave it from before Shabbat. Now, if you remember, what did we learn? That you can be matmin. Remember, we learned about hatmana. What's hatmana? It's surrounding something on three sides, okay, or maybe even just putting it up against the flame directly, right, where it's touching the fire. That is what we call hatmana. Now, that one can do, in which case, if you remember, you can do it before Shabbat, as long as it's not something that's mosif hevel. Okay, we're going to get a lot more into this in the next parak. It's the whole beginning of the next parak. With what can you do hatmana with, and what can't you do hatmana with? So the issue is that if we assume that the Mishnah is talking about lahachzir, which means that lahashot, to put something on a flame and leave it for before Shabbat is allowed, well, then we could understand why you would distinguish between tocha and al gaba. Why is that? Because if you look at Rashi, he explains also, Hainu deshane ben tocha al gaba, dechimashe letocha deshe'ena grufa matmin mamash beremetz. If you're going to do it before Shabbat, well, you can't put it tocha in the fire with gechalim, coals that are burning, because that's exactly what they say you're not allowed to do in hatmana. And that's why we'd start distinguishing between inside, where then it would be an issue of hatmana, and you can't even do that before Shabbat. So again, if the Mishnah is talking about lahachzir, implied within the Mishnah, again, once it's missing words and we add those words in, it means one can do shehiyah from before Shabbat, even if you don't move the coals to the side. But that's only al gaba, on top of the fire, but not inside the fire. Because inside the fire, it will be hatmana with something that we call as mosif hevel, is added. And la'iyamart lishhotznan, but if you say that the Mishnah is talking about shehiyah, and then what does the Mishnah say? Well, you can do it as long as you move all the coals to the side or you cover them up. In that case, there should be no difference, mali tocha, mali al gaba. It shouldn't matter whether you're putting it on top or inside the fire, because at this point, the coals are irrelevant, right? It's not considered davar hamosif hevel. So it doesn't make so much sense to say that. So therefore, the Gemara seems to say this would support the reading that it's lahachzir. Again, this was a statement Rabbi Chelbo said in the name of Rabbi Chama Bar Guri in the name of Rav about our Mishnah, and it doesn't make sense that they would be talking about if our Mishnah really meant lahashot. So then they say, wait a minute, misavart Rabbi Chelbo areshakai, asefakai. Who's to say that he's talking about the beginning part of the Mishnah, which again either implies she is allowed without grufuk tuma, or states explicitly that she is not allowed unless it's garuf v'kachum, and that's how we got to our conclusion. We could say aseifakai that he's actually referring to when can one return something to the fire on Shabbat. Ubeit Hillel omrim af machzirin, and he's referring to when Beit Hillel says you can return something to the fire. Va'amar Rabbi Chelbo, amar Rav Chama Bar Guri, amar Rav, lo shanu ela al gaba, aval tocha asur. Now, what would he be saying here? Now, why didn't we want this reading before? Because we said, well, if you're returning it to the fire, it's already garuf v'kachum, you've already moved the coals. So what should be the issue? But he says, no. That's also an issue, because on Shabbat, you can't do hatmana even if it's not adding more heat. So therefore, you could say that what Rav Chelbo was saying in the name of Rav was actually talking about lahachzir. One can only return it on Shabbat if it's on top of the fire and not inside the fire, because hatmana is not allowed on Shabbat in any way, even if you've moved the coals to the side. So therefore, this is inconclusive, okay? If you're getting frustrated every time we have something that's inconclusive, don't worry, because we're going to end with also inconclusive. So this is where we're going. We're not going to end up with a good answer here. So next, Tashma. Shtei kirot hamatimot. If you have two burners, think about like in your house, you have burners right next to each other. Here it's a little bit different because you have kind of two different sections with it seems to be there's a wall in between. So you have like a little divider between the two different burners. And you've also done something a little different with each burner. One, you've taken the coals and you've either moved them to the side or covered them up with ashes. And the second one is not. Okay, you've left it regular. Mashin al gabe grufa uktuma, ve'en mashin al she'ena grufa ve'ena uktuma. So you can leave something from before Shabbat on the one that you've moved the coals to the side or covered them up, and you can't on the other. Umahen mashin, and what can you put on this fire? Beit Shammai omrim velo klum, nothing. Okay, Beit Shammai basically says nothing is allowed here. Beit Hillel omrim chamin avalo tavshil. Beit Hillel says, well, you can put hot water here, you just can't put something cooked. Akar, now by the way, you can already see this is very different than what we saw in our Mishnah, right? Akar, once you've taken it off the fire, divrei hakol lo yachzir. Everybody agrees that you can't return it to the fire. Now, this also doesn't agree because we said in our Mishnah that Beit Hillel says you can return it to the fire. Divrei Rabbi Meir. This is Rabbi Meir's approach. We've seen this a bunch of times. We're going to see this a lot more, that sometimes Beit Hillel, Beit Shammai had a machloket, and in later generations, there was a debate about what exactly their machloket was. So here, Rabbi Meir's approach is to go machmir on everything. So shehiyah is only allowed with hot water, according to Beit Hillel, and nothing, according to Beit Shammai, and chazara is not allowed at all. So that's taking what we had in our Mishnah and going one step more machmir, basically. The next opinion is Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Beit Shammai omrim chamin avalo tavshil. You can, this is what we said, looks like our Mishnah, right? You can have hot water, but not a cooked item. You can put on before Shabbat. Ubeit Hillel omrim chamin v'tavshil. Beit Hillel said, you can put hot liquids, right, and a cooked item. Beit Shammai omrim notlin avalo machzirin, ubeit Hillel omrim af machzirin. So now, which approach does this work with in our Mishnah? Well, it works very well. Iyamar bishlama, the way we understood this simple reading of our Mishnah, this sounds exactly like it. Lishhotna, the Mishnah in the beginning was talking about putting something on the fire before Shabbat. Because then you would say, matniti mane Rabbi Yehudahi. Then our Mishnah matches perfectly Rabbi Yehuda. Shehi is allowed if you do garuf v'katum, because again, what was the first line here? There were two, right? And then we said, you can only put on the one that you move the coals to the side, or cover them up with ashes. And then Beit Hillel says, well, both you can leave chamin and tavshil. And Beit Shammai said only chamin. That's exactly what our Mishnah said. Well, now you have a problem. Because if you say the Mishnah is lahachzir, then what do you say about shehiyah? Shehiyah can be done, remember, according to that reading, even if you didn't do anything with the coals, even if the coals are open. Now, that's clearly not what this source said. This source said, remember, there was one that was garuf v'katum, one that wasn't, and you're only allowed to leave it on the one that you did grifo ktima. So therefore, iyamar bishlama lishotna matnitim mane Rabbi Yehudahi. So if, I'm sorry, going back, sorry, I went back. Ela iyamar lachzirtna matnitim mane lo Rabbi Yehuda v'lo Rabbi Meir. Then our Mishnah ends up not like Rabbi Yehuda and not like Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir, now they're going to explain. If you say it's like Rabbi Meir, then we're going to say kasha lebeit shammai bechada ulebeit hillel betarte. Okay, I made a chart here to make it a little bit easier for you, so you can look on the sheet and the chart will help. If you say like Rabbi Meir, then we're not going to understand Beit Shammai in one area, which is Beit Shammai said nothing, right? And Beit Hillel said, you can do it not in chamin and not in tavshil. And our Mishnah said chamin. You're allowed to. Ula Beit Hillel betarte, because number one, Beit Hillel said nothing. Beit Hillel said you can do chamin, but not tavshil. So number one, it's difficult there. And the second is that it says that Beit Hillel lo machzirin. And according to our Mishnah, Beit Hillel can be machzirin. And Rabbi Yehuda, kasha grufa uktuma. And if you say like Rabbi Yehuda, well, again, our Mishnah says you don't need grufa uktuma, according to lahachzir tznan. And Rabbi Yehuda says, according to the Braita, you would need. So basically, we're going to have a lot of questions about that reading. So now the Gemara says, no, la'olam ema lecha lahachzir tznan. Really, you could say lahachzir. V'tana didan savar lek Rabbi Yehuda b'chada upalag ale b'chada. We could simply say that our Mishnah is lahachzir. This source has a different approach. This source is Rabbi Yehuda, and our Tana agrees with Rabbi Yehuda in one aspect, but not in another. Savar lak Rabbi Yehuda b'chada, in which area? B'chamin v'tavshil, in terms of what do Beit Shammai Beit Hillel allow? Beit Shammai allows chamin and Beit Hillel allows both. That it agrees with. And it's actually really more than one. Notzlinu machzirin, and the Beit Hillel allows to return something to the fire, and Beit Shammai doesn't. Upalig ale b'chada, but it disagrees with Rabbi Yehuda about the ilutana didan, our Tana of our Mishnah Savar, lishot afal pisha eno garuf b'katum. Rabbi Yehuda Savar v'lishot nami garuf b'katum in ilo lo. So we end up saying, in the issue of Rufu Tuma, the Tana of our Mishnah disagrees with Rabbi Yehuda. Now, this is a little odd to do this when you have a machlok of Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, and then to say that our Mishnah has a third approach is a little bit rare, but one could simply say that. There's Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Meir's approach, and there's a third approach in our Mishnah. So again, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Meir think it's only allowed in Rufu Ktima. If you then Shihiyah, again, Rabbi Meir doesn't think Shihiyah is allowed at all. Rabbi Yehuda will say it's allowed in Garuf Katum if you do Garuf Katum. And our Mishnah goes so far as to say even if you don't do Garuf Katum, it's allowed. Okay, so we tried two different sources to try to say maybe this would shed light on our Mishnah. In the end, we say all those sources can be explained either as, according to the last source, it just disagrees with our Mishnah, and our Mishnah is a new approach. And the first opinion, which was actually describing our Mishnah, we were able to explain in both ways. So in the end, it's inconclusive and we don't have an answer. Okay, so we're left with no answer. By the way, I forgot, because I started late, had issues with the Zoom. I forgot to talk about sponsorships for today, so I'm taking a quick break and talk about sponsorships. This week's shiurim are sponsored by Talia Kaplan-Rubin in honor of her husband, Benjamin Rubin, who's been learning the daf along with her also. She's proud of you. Keep up the good work. Today's shiur sponsored by Tracy Rosen in honor of all her friends and colleagues who are studying Daf Yomi this cycle, and by Betsy Melman for Fuash Lema for Sarah Sally Bakari, the mother of Shoshana Nisan. Okay, back to our Gemara. So now we're starting from the first wide line, the last word of the first wide line, Ibayalahu. Now we have another question. Mahu lismoch ba. Are you allowed to put something next to the fire? Until now, when you usually use burners, what do? You put something on top. That's where you put something on the fire. What if you put it next to the fire? Things could heat up next to the fire. So maybe you're allowed to do that. So do we say, tocha v'gaba asur, aval lismoch ba shapri dami? Putting it inside or on top of would be forbidden, but to put it next to would be allowed. Odil maloshna, or maybe it doesn't really matter. Tashma, let's try to learn from here. Now we're going to bring the same source we brought just before. And maybe this is why they're bringing this up now, because maybe one can learn it from the source, and that's the connection. Now you have these two burners that are right next to each other. What does it allow you to do? It allows you to put it on the one that you've stoked, that you've moved the coals to the side or covered them up, even though it's right next to a fire where the fire's uncovered, right? And the coals are going strong. So what do you see here? You're putting it next to a fire, right? You're putting it on one burner where it's allowed, but the burner right next to it is not allowed to put on, and yet you could put next to it. Even though it's getting havla, the heat from the burner where the coals are going strong is actually reaching your fire. So it seems to say it's allowed. So now the Gemara says, not necessarily. Dil mashane hatam de kevan de midlia shalit ba'avira. Because it's raised, so the air is getting, if you think about it, if you put something right, you're not actually putting it right next to the fire, you're putting it in the airspace above the fire, because you're putting it right, there's these two kirayim, and you're putting it on top of one burner, that's already raised and not exactly next to the fire. But maybe next to the fire itself would actually be a problem. So you can't necessarily learn it from there. So let's try another source. Tashma da amar Rav Safra amar Rav Chia, kitma v'nitlavta. Let's say you cover it with ashes. Now, generally doing that will put out the fire. However, it doesn't totally put out the coals, and sometimes it actually could get relit on its own. So that's what happened here. Nitlavta, it got relit. Somchin la umekaymin aleha. You're allowed to, number one, put it next to it, put something next to the fire. Umekaymin aleha. You're allowed to, this is another word for shihiyah, for leaving it before Shabbat. V'notzlim mimena. You can take it off. Umachzirin la. And you could put it back. So what does it sound like from here? It sounds like smicha is in the list of things that's only allowed if you already did the ktama, right? So here it says, shma mina lismoch nami kitma in lo ktama lo. If you didn't cover it, then it's not going to work. So then they say, wait a minute. If you're going to say that all the things on this list are only allowed if the ashes were covered or moved to the side, we'll look at something else on this list, which is certainly allowed even if it's not covered. According to what you're saying, you can only take something off the fire if it was covered from before, right? If you covered the ashes. Now that clearly, this is something we didn't really talk about, but they keep talking about notzlin umachzirin. You can take it off and put it back on. Now, the reason why they brought notzlin really was to say you can take it off and then put it back on. But what they're saying here is maybe smicha is the same as that. It's just saying you could put it next to it or leave it on, but not necessarily that that's only allowed if it's covered up, because for sure you can take something off even if it's not covered. So therefore they say, alatana notzlim mishum machzirin. In other words, the taking it off is only there because they want to say, take it off and put it back. Hachanami tana somchim mishum mekaymin. So it says you can put it next to it. You can also as well put it on. So then the Gemara says, wait a minute, you're comparing apples and oranges. Hachi hashta hatam notzlinu machzirin b'chad makomu. When you take something off and you put it back on, we mean you take it off from one place and you put it right back on that place. But Tana notzlim mishum machzirin elahacha sumchim b'chad makomu umekaymin b'chad makomu. But the smicha, putting it next to the fire and putting it on the fire, are two different locations, and one isn't coming to explain the other, in which case it would indicate from here that the word smicha is specific, and it's only, and therefore it's only if you actually covered the ashes. That's what it would sound like. However, it's not clear. So we end up with, again, a lot of lack of clarity here. It could be read that smicha is only if you cover the ashes. It could be read as not. Here, at least, the Gemara is going to ask, "By have Allah." So what's the deal? Can we or can't we? So they bring another source, Tashma. Here you have it explicitly. If you have something with gefet or eitzim, what do we say? You can put something next to the fire, but you can't put it on the fire unless you did grufa uktuma. So therefore, it seems very clear from here that smicha, putting it next to it, is actually allowed. The Braita continues, and we're just going to read this because once they quote the beginning of the Braita, they quote the end, but we've already gotten our answer. Gechalim sha'amemu. If the coals start going out, o shenatan alen oret shel pishtan daka. This is like ktuma, putting on it flax that's going to basically start putting out the fire. Harehu ktuma. This is another way of doing ktuma. It doesn't have to be with ashes. Anyway, where if already the coals are going out on their own, or you put something else on top that will help it go out, that's also considered ktuma. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak bar Nachmani, Amar Rabbi Yoshai. Now we're going to have 4 different opinions here. Okay, we're going to get into more details, and now we're going to get into halacha, because now it's not just what did our Mishnah mean, but what did the Amoraim say. The first opinion is going to be Rabbi Yoshaya. Okay, I want you to notice they're all from Eretz Yisrael here. The next 3 are going to be 3 different versions of what Rabbi Yochanan himself holds. Okay, and we're going to get into what I mentioned before about mitztamik v'yafelo and mitztamik v'ralo. If something as it cooks, it's going to be good for it, well, then there's more of a concern you're going to stoke the coals. If it's going to get worse, then we're not really worried you're going to make the fire higher because you'll actually ruin the food. So Amar Rabbi Yitzchak bar Nachmani, Amar Rabbi Yoshai. Kitma v'huv ara. If you put out the ashes and then they lit up again, this is similar to what we just saw. Mashin aleha chamin shuchmu kol tzarkan. We're going to have 2 issues. Number 1, mitztamik v'yafelo, mitztamik v'ralo. We're also going to have issues about how much the item needs to be cooked. Is it enough to be cooked partially, like machal and drosai, half or a third, where it's edible, but people don't generally eat it that way? Or does it have to be cooked fully? So notice his words. He says, Mashin aleh chamim shuchmu kol tzarkan. You can put something on it once you did the ktuma, but then it lights up again. You're allowed to put on things that are fully cooked. Water that's been boiled entirely, and a tafshil shebishel kol tzarkan. So now the Gemara is going to ask, wait a minute. Generally, a tafshil is generally assumed that it's good for it to leave it on the fire. So shma mina mitztamech b'yata lo mutal. Can we infer from what Rabbi Yoshai is saying that you can actually leave something on a fire, right? Because what happened here? You covered it up. However, it got hot again. It got more hot, and it seems like we're going to allow you to do this, even though it's actually good for it. We're not worried we're going to stoke the coals. So they say shanehacha dikitma. Now it's different here. Even though the fire came back up strong, you actually put ashes on top of it, which means that you indicated that you're not interested in this heating up anymore. Otherwise, you wouldn't put the ashes on top. So again, we talked about what's the issue of tama in last class, which is you've done a hekir, something noticeable that you're not interested in the fire going strong. So even though maybe it is beneficial for the food to stay on longer and there's a concern theoretically that you might stoke the coals, since you already did an act by putting ashes on top, you showed everybody or you showed yourself that you're not interested in heating it up anymore, and that's why it's okay. But generally, mitztamech b'yatalo is going to be forbidden. So now they say, Yihachi ma'ila meimra. Well, then there's no chiddush here. It's k'tumah, and it's cooked fully. Why is he even telling us this? It's pretty obvious. So they say no, because there was one point in what he said that wasn't so obvious, which is huv'ara itztri chale. Because what happened in this case? The fire heated up again. So you might have thought, ma'u detema kevan de huv'ara hadra la lemilta kamaita. You might have thought, since it got hot again, that it reverts back to its original state, and it's as if it undid your putting the ashes on top. Kamash malan, he's teaching you that actually not. Okay, here comes our first version of Rabbi Yochanan. Amar Rabbi Bar Chama, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Ktama v'huvara mashhin aleha chamim shuchmu kol tzarkan v'tafshir shabishel kol tzarko. This sounds just like Rabbi Yoshaya, right? You put the ashes on top, it lit up on fire again. You can leave something on. If Rabbi Yochanan basically said, if you covered it with ashes and then you put the fire on again, you're allowed, and the fire came back on its own, then you can leave on chamin shuchmu kol tzarkan and tafshil shel kol tzarko, even if there's gechalim of rotem, okay, things that are very hot. So shma mina mitztamech b'yata lo mutar. They're gonna, since he said the same thing as Rabbi Yoshaya, basically, they're gonna ask the exact same questions about it. Are you saying you could put a cooked item, even though it's better for the cooked item to stay on the fire longer, and the fire is going strong now? Aren't we worried that maybe you'll stoke the coals? No, they say shanehacha dikitma. No, since you covered it with ashes, again, this is just a repeat of the last sugya. Since you covered it with ashes, it's allowed. So ihachi ma'ila meimra. Well, then what's the chidush? Just like in the last case, what was the chidush? Huv'ara itztri chale. He needed it because this is a case where the fire got heated up again, and that's why he needed to tell you. Well, now they say, okay, now you have to know some history. Rabbi Yoshaya was Rabbi Yochanan's teacher. So if that's the case, now why would Rabbi Yochanan basically say, Hainu hach? But then he's saying the exact same thing as Rabbi said. You don't need to tell us something that your rabbi already said. So what did they answer? Gechalim shel rotem itztri chale. He wanted to teach us that even if we're talking about gechalim of rotem, which are much, much hotter than average coals, even then it's going to be allowed. Okay? So that's the chidush. Okay, so the first statement of Rabbi Yochanan was basically like Rabbi Yoshaya, adding one extra point. But now we're going to have two other versions of Rabbi Yochanan. Amar Rav Sheshet Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Kira shesikua begefet ubeetzim, mashin aleh hachamin shelo huchmu kol tzarkan, v'tavshil shelo bishel kol tzarko. Now, what does this tell you? If you have gefet or eitzim, which were the regular coals we've been talking about, you're allowed to put items that are not fully cooked. Now, not fully cooked doesn't mean raw. Not fully cooked means they're ma'achal ben drosai. They're already semi-edible. So you're allowed to put these on. Akar, but if you took it off the flame and they're not fully cooked, lo yachzir ad shigrof or ad shiten efer. Then you need grufa uktuma. So notice, according to this version of Rabbi Yochanan, he would hold like Hananya. Machal ben drosai is fine. And what else? And we have the issue of you don't need grufa uktuma. So now the Gemara says, kasavar matnitin lahachzir tnan. According to this, you would say that he holds that it's lahachzir. Okay? Aval lishot mashin apapi she'eno garaf e'eno katum. Okay, so according to this, Rabbi Yochanan holds that you don't need grufa uktuma. Okay, and you don't need machav and drosa. He basically holds like Hanani. So, Amar Rava travayu tananhi. Rava says it doesn't make sense that Rav Sheshet would be telling us this. It's a little strange he says this because it's not so obvious, but he says he's basically teaching us exactly what it says in the Mishnah. Both chidushim that he mentions are both stated explicitly in Mishnayot. Lishot tanina, the fact that you can leave something from before Shabbat, we already learned, and this is way back on Daf Yud Tet. Ein notnin et hapak betoch hatanur im chashecha below charara al gabei gechalim ela kadesh yikremu paneha. Remember, this was you could leave the bread in the oven as long as it got browned on the sides, which means not fully cooked. So the fact that you could leave it not fully cooked, we already learned from the Mishnah there, because one can infer, since it says kadesh yikremu paneha, ha karmu paneha shari lachzir shari. This indicates, right? You can infer from that Mishnah. Well, as long as it's brown means if it wasn't brown, you're not allowed to do it, which is what Rabbi Yochanan was teaching. The issue of lahachzir nami tanina, the fact that you can put it back on only if it's garfa katum, well, that was stated explicitly in our Mishnah. Tanina beit hillel omrim af machzirin. And it was obvious from our Mishnah, which is what we explained then, lo kasharu beit hillel ela begrufa uktuma. Abba b'sheina grufa uktuma lo. That was one of the issues that wasn't up for debate in the Mishnah. It was clear that when Beit Hillel allows lahachzir to return something to the fire, it's clearly only if it's garif v'katu. So why is Rav Sheshet telling us something that's stated in the Mishnayot? So Rav Sheshet nami diyuka dematnitin kamashmalan. He's trying to teach us a diyuk from the Mishnah. In other words, things that weren't stated explicitly but were inferred from the Mishnah. What is this exactly? So Rashi says the ha karmu paneh is a diyuk, because it said, right, if it's karmu paneh, which would imply that if not karmu paneh, then you're not allowed to put it on. Tosfot says, what are you talking about? That's not a diyuk. That's obvious, right? That's not an inference, but a diyuk is an inference. That's very obvious. Tosfot says it's actually the reading of our Mishnah, that are reading how to read our Mishnah is lachzir tnan, and it goes like Hananya. That's the chiddush. Okay, he's teaching us, and that's a much better pshat, that the diyuk is how we read our Mishnah, because it wasn't obvious to anybody how to read our Mishnah. There was a whole debate. That's what we spent a whole daf discussing. How do we read our Mishnah? So that's a better shot in my mind. Okay. Amar Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Third reading of Rabbi Yochanan. Kira shesikua begefet ubeetzim. Okay. If you have again our regular gefet and eitzim, mashin aleh tafshil shabishel kol tzorko v'chamin shuchmu kol tzorkan. Okay. So now what do we see? You can put on the fire, okay, but only things that are fully cooked, not machal and drosa, okay? Even if it's good, okay? Here you don't need to move the coals to the side. You can do shehiyah from before Shabbat, even if the coals weren't moved to the side. So you would say lahachzir tnan in our Mishnah, and even if mitztamech v'yafelo, even if it's good for them, okay? As long as it's fully cooked, as opposed to the last reading, which was machal and drosai was sufficient. So Amalei Ahume Rabbanit Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda. First question, they ask him, how Rabbi Shmuel the Amrit Travayu mitztamech v'yafelo asur? How can Rabbi Yochanan say mitztamech v'yafelo is allowed when Rav and Shmuel both say mitztamech v'yafelo is forbidden? So what's the obvious answer? Amar le atu le late anayada. You think I don't know this? Amar Rav Yosef, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel mitztamech v'yafelo asur. You think I don't know that he says that? Ki kamina lach Rabbi Yochanan kamina. There's Rav and Shmuel on one side. Rabbi Yochanan was as big and important rabbi as he was. Rabbi Yochanan has a different opinion. Okay. Amar le Rav Ukma, Mimeshan, the Rav Ashi. So now we're going to start to see different minhagim about this. So Rav Ukma from Meshan, which was outside of Babel, says to Rav Ashi, you guys live right near Rav and Shmuel's territory. Now, obviously, they're not at the same time period, but you live where they live. So, Avidu Rav Shmuel. But Anan, we're kind of in between Babel and Eretz Israel. We do like Rabbi Yochanan. We're more Mekel because we can hold like him based on where we live. Amar le Abai le Rav Yosef. Abai asked Rav Yosef, Ma'u lashon. So, can you do shehiyah? Amar le ha Rav Yehuda mashe le va'achil. Rav Yehuda actually did it. He would leave his food on an open fire without having moved the coals to the side or covered them with ashes. So Amar le bar minei to Rav Yehuda dekevan de mesukanu afilu b'Shabbat nami shar leme'avale. He says you can't take example from Rabbi Yehuda. He was sick most of his life. He had health issues, and because of that, he was allowed. Now, here we're talking about a chole she'en bo sakana. Okay, a chole, he wasn't on his deathbed, but he had health issues, and because of that, he was allowed to do this. He needed hot food, but that doesn't tell you anything about us. Leave it lachmai. What about people like us who aren't sick? Again, you see the issue of rabbis doing things, even if they have exceptions, people misinterpret. So you can't learn from there. So Amarle, Basura Mashu. In Surah, they did it. Nachman bar Yitzchak Mari de Uvdahave. He's a Baal Masim. He was very careful about halacha. Umashu leba afil, and he would leave food on an uncovered fire from before Shabbat, and he would eat it. Amrav Ashi, Ka'im Nakame de Rav Huna, Vishayin le Kasa de Harsana afil. Another example. They keep bringing different examples of cases that happen. I was in front of Rav Huna, and I saw you put this fish. It was a fish that they would roast. And he would eat it. I don't know if it's because he thinks even if it gets cooked longer, it'll be, even if it improves with cooking, we still allow it. There was a thing here, it had flour in it. The whole question became, well, I don't know how we define whether it's good for something to stay on the flame longer or not. So when he did this kasa de harsana, is it since it had flour in it, it's basically going to get worse as it goes on? Or he says it's only if mitzamik v'yata v'ralo can you leave it on, but if mitzamik v'yata lo, it's forbidden. Klala de milta, and here's the rule: kol dipe micha, if there's flour in it, mitzamik v'ralo. Levar mitavshil de lifta. The only exception to the rule is if you have this turnip dish, the afagav de ipe micha, even though it doesn't have flour in it, mitzamik v'yata lo. It's still good if you leave it on long. Right, I'm sorry, even though it does have flour, it's still considered mitzamik b'yafalo. Normally, having flour, I wonder if it makes it burn if there's flour in it, okay? But this one dish with turnips actually is better with flour. You can see they're getting mamash into every detail of what kind of cooked dish, how to know the difference, because this was very, very practical. But hanimile de ipe bisra. Now they say, well, that's only if there's meat and turnips. If this meat turnip dish, because the meat, I guess, has liquid in it, and the meat you want to cook longer, then it's going to be mitzamik b'yafalo. Avaleitle bisla mitzamik b'ralo. But if it's just turnips with flour, then it's going to be bad for it if you leave it on longer. The chayit le bisra. And one more thing about this, nami lo maram. This is a very interesting one. Ela de lo kabai le orchim. Aval kabai le orchim mitzamik b'ralo. If you want it for guests, to leave it on the fire, the meat for a very long time, the meat falls apart and it becomes like pieces, right? You think about pot roast that you leave on the fire for a long time, it starts falling apart. Nobody really wants to serve that to your guests. You want to serve your guests a full piece of meat. So if you're serving to guests, it's actually bad for it, which means actually that you're allowed to leave it on the fire because it's bad for it to leave it on the fire for longer. And the last thing for today, lifta daisa b'tmare. If you have figs that you're cooking or porridge or dates, those are considered mitzamik b'ralahem, which again would mean that you can leave them on the fire before Shabbat to warm up. So we've concluded, even though we saw lots of different opinions, the Gemara here is being very clear about mitzamik v'ralo. One can leave on the fire. Mitzamik v'yatalo, one can't leave on the fire because you might come to stoke coals. And then the Gemara gave us examples of what would fall into each category. It doesn't necessarily help us because we don't really cook those items as much as they did. But again, they're kind of telling their people what food items can be left on and what can't. Okay.